She hurled the champagne glass across the rooftop, and every single person in that room went silent. Not because of the sound, because of who threw it. Vivian Hartwell, the woman who never lost control, the woman who was control. And in 60 seconds, she was going to find out that the man she trusted most in this world had just stolen everything she ever built and put his name on it. But what nobody saw coming: the storm, the blackout, and a Navy officer's front door that would change both their lives forever. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You do not want to miss what happens next. The glass hit the marble pillar and exploded into 1,000 pieces. Nobody moved. 42 floors above Manhattan, the rooftop of the Hargrove Tower was filled with the most powerful names in American architecture. Investors, city planners, foreign delegates in tailored suits, and every single one of them stood frozen, holding their drinks, staring at the woman standing at the center of the terrace. Vivian Hartwell, 41 years old, CEO of Hartwell Global Design. The woman who had rebuilt Detroit's waterfront, designed 3 of the most celebrated civic centers in the Western Hemisphere, and had just secured the Meridian Project contract. A $2.4 billion commission to redesign the Chicago Lakefront Corridor. The largest architectural contract awarded to a private firm in 11 years. It was supposed to be the greatest night of her career. She had planned it that way. She had planned everything that way. Her event director, a nervous young man named Perry, rushed to her side with a dustpan he'd grabbed from God knows where. "Ms. Hartwell." "Leave it," she said. Her voice was quiet. That was the thing about Vivian. She didn't need to raise it. The tone alone was enough to make grown men step back. Perry stepped back. She stood there for exactly 3 seconds, long enough for the room to understand she was not embarrassed, not apologetic, not rattled, and then she turned and walked toward the elevator. Her COO, Raymond Cho, fell into step beside her immediately. 20 years in corporate architecture had taught Raymond to read Vivian Hartwell the way sailors read weather, and right now every signal was screaming storm. The alderman is still waiting for a photo. Cancel it. The Deutsche investors flew in specifically. Raymond. She stopped walking, turned to look at him with those dark, unreadable eyes. Cancel it. He canceled it. The elevator doors closed, and Vivian finally allowed herself to breathe. She looked at the phone in her hand, read the message again, for the 4th time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. "You need to see this. Now. He's going live in 20 minutes. Priya. Attached was a link. She'd already clicked it. She'd clicked it standing right there in the middle of the celebration with champagne in her hand and 200 people applauding behind her, and the world had tilted so violently sideways that she'd grabbed the nearest surface, which happened to be a waiter's tray, and sent 3 glasses of Moët sliding off the edge. The 4th glass she'd thrown herself. She wasn't entirely sure why. Reflex. Rage. The sudden, desperate need to do something with her hands before they started shaking. On the phone screen, frozen mid-frame, was the face of Reginald Stowe, her mentor. The man who had brought her into this industry 20 years ago when she was a 21-year-old scholarship student from Baltimore with a beat-up drafting kit and exactly 0 connections. The man who had co-signed her first firm loan. Who had championed her work in rooms she wasn't allowed to enter yet. Who had called her 3 years ago when her mother was dying and said, "I'll handle everything here. You go be her daughter." That man. That same man was now standing in front of a press wall at the Architectural Foundation Gala in Washington, D.C., smiling his warm and grandfatherly smile and saying into approximately 11 live cameras that the Meridian Lakefront vision was his. The concept originated in conversations I was having as far back as 2019. Reginald's voice came through the phone speaker, smooth and measured and utterly convincing. My team and I developed the framework over several years. We're proud to see it finally moving forward. His team, his framework, his concept. Vivian had spent 31 months on the Meridian design. She had the drafts. She had the time-stamped files going back to March of 2021. She had the presentation decks, the site survey reports, the 47 revision cycles, the emails. God, the emails where Reginald himself had written in his own words, "This is brilliant, Viv. This is all you." She had all of it. And none of it mattered right now in this elevator with the city spread out below her and the floor numbers ticking down and her whole chest cavity feeling like someone had reached in and removed something load-bearing. The elevator opened to the lobby. She walked out into the marble atrium, past the security desk, past the coat check, and straight through the revolving door onto 6th Avenue. The air hit her like a wall. Not cold. Wild. There was something wrong with the sky. She registered it distantly the way you register background noise. A greenish tint to the clouds that she hadn't noticed from the rooftop. Wind that wasn't behaving the way wind normally behaved, coming from 3 directions at once, lifting her hair and the hem of her coat simultaneously. She didn't care. She stood on the sidewalk with her phone pressed to her ear, waiting for Priya to pick up. Priya Anand was her head of legal. She had been Vivian's first hire 11 years ago at a time when Hartwell Global Design was 4 people in a borrowed office in Midtown. Priya knew everything. Every document, every contract, every conversation that had ever been logged or recorded or whispered across a conference table. "Tell me you're already building the case," Vivian said the moment the line connected. "I've been building it for 40 minutes. Priya's voice was tight, controlled. But Vivian knew that voice. That was the voice Priya used when things were very, very bad. "Viv, he's good. He's been planning this. There are documents I don't know how, but he has versions of your Meridian files with his metadata embedded. Somebody got inside our system." Vivian went still. "How long ago?" "We think 8 months. Maybe more. 8 months. She'd been sitting across from him at dinner 4 months ago. She'd shown him the final rendering over dessert, and he had said, "You've outdone yourself, Vivian. This is the one they'll remember you for." She'd been so proud. She'd actually felt proud. She could still remember the exact temperature of the room, the weight of the wine glass in her hand, the way his eyes had crinkled at the corners when he smiled. She had been such a fool. "Priya." Her voice came out lower than she intended. "Can we win?" Silence on the line. 2 seconds. 3. "We can fight," Priya said carefully. "But tonight, Viv, I need you to not do anything. Don't call him. Don't release a statement. Don't let the board hear your voice until I've had 8 hours to build a wall around this. He's going to own this story by morning. He already owns tonight. We need to own tomorrow. Please, go somewhere quiet. Go home. I'll call you at 6 a.m. The line went dead. Vivian lowered the phone. She was standing on 6th Avenue in a $3,400 dress, with her hair coming undone, and the wind doing something increasingly strange around her, and she was completely, utterly, profoundly alone. She had approximately 40 people on her payroll who reported directly to her. She could not think of a single one to call. The storm made its move at 9:47 p.m., not gradually, not with the polite escalation of a normal weather event. One moment the wind was bad, and the next moment the sky simply opened and the rain came down so hard and so fast that Vivian couldn't see the building directly across the street. She'd been trying to hail a cab for 6 minutes. There were no cabs. There was no Uber. The app was spinning the city grid, apparently already collapsing under the surge of 10,000 people trying to go home at once. She had retreated under the awning of a closed dry cleaner on 51st, pressed against the glass, watching the avenue transform into a river. Her phone buzzed. "Raymond. All bridges restricted. No crosstown traffic. MTA suspended above ground. Hartwell. What's your location?" She typed back 51st and 6th. He responded, "Stay put. Sending car. Might be 2+ hours. 2 hours. Standing on a street corner in a thunderstorm in heels, in the most expensive dress she owned, with her life's work being dismantled on live television 40 blocks south. She almost laughed. She pulled the coat tighter, the rain angling under the awning now, and that was when she heard it, a small sound almost lost in the roar of the storm. A child's voice. "Dad, Dad, the bag is getting wet." Vivian turned. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, was standing 3 feet away from her under the same awning, gripping a bright yellow backpack to her chest with both arms. She had her father's hand. She was looking up at the man beside her with the absolute bottomless confidence of a child who has never doubted that the person holding her hand can solve any problem in the world. The man was on his phone. One hand holding the little girl's, one pressed to his ear, head slightly bowed against the sound of the storm. He was tall, the kind of tall that reads as solid rather than just big. Dark jacket, no tie, the kind of posture that you don't learn in a boardroom. You learn it somewhere where posture matters for survival. "I understand," he was saying into the phone. His voice was low and unhurried. "Yes, sir. I'll be there by 0600. No, sir. It won't be an issue." He paused. "Yes. I understand." He hung up, crouched down to the little girl's level immediately. "Hey, Bug. Backpack okay?" "The bottom is wet." He took the backpack from her, checked it, turned it so the wet side was away from her. "Mr. Bear, okay?" She checked through the zipper. "He's okay." "Good." He stood back up, looked out at the street, assessed it the way someone assesses a problem rather than a situation with complete practicality. No drama. Then he took out his phone again, and Vivian watched him try 3 apps in sequence, his jaw set with quiet, focused patience. She knew that kind of patience. It was the kind you built not by being calm by nature, but by training yourself again and again to override the impulse to react. She recognized it because she had spent 20 years cultivating it in herself. And then because the situation was absurd, and her dress was getting wet, and she had nothing left to lose tonight, she spoke. "Nothing's moving," she said. "I've been trying for 10 minutes. The grid's down." He looked at her. His eyes were dark brown, steady, without the particular flicker of recognition that she usually got from strangers, that small adjustment people made when they realized they were looking at Vivian Hartwell. Either he didn't know who she was, or he didn't care. "Yeah," he said. "I figured. You live nearby." He looked at her for a moment, not suspicious exactly. More like someone who was running a quick, unsentimental assessment. She'd seen that look before, usually on military men at government briefings. 12 blocks, he said. The little girl looked up at Vivian with enormous brown eyes. "You have rain on your dress," she said. "I know," Vivian said. "It's a pretty dress." "Thank you." The little girl looked at her father. "Dad, she's getting wet." He looked at Vivian again. Something in his face shifted, not softened exactly, but resolved. The way a decision looks when someone makes it without overthinking it. "You need somewhere to wait this out." Vivian Hartwell had not accepted help from a stranger in 11 years. She had a rule about it. She had a rule about most things. The rain came sideways under the awning and soaked the left side of her completely. "Yes," she said. His name was Cole Riker. She learned that in the first 30 seconds because he introduced himself while they were walking, or rather moving as fast as possible through a street that had become, in the space of 20 minutes, genuinely dangerous. Water up to her ankles, wind pulling at everything. The little girl Lily tucked against his side with his jacket over her head, one of his hands wrapped around her small shoulders with an easiness that spoke of 1,000 previous storms, real and otherwise. He didn't talk much. He moved. That was the thing she noticed first about Cole Riker. Most men in her world, CEOs, architects, investors, board members, they filled space with words, with projections and arguments, and the particular kind of noise that powerful men made to announce themselves. Cole Riker moved through the storm like someone who had been in worse conditions and had made his peace with it. "Lily," he said at one point, leaning down, "you doing okay?" "My shoes are wet," Lily reported with the gravity of a small person delivering critical intelligence. "Noted. 2 more blocks." "Is that lady coming to our house?" "For a little while. Is that okay with you?" Lily considered this seriously. Then she looked up at Vivian, who was picking her way around a garbage can that had tipped into the middle of the sidewalk. "Do you like grilled cheese?" Lily asked. Vivian blinked. "Yes. We have bread," Lily told her, as if this settled everything. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that had clearly been built in a different era, when sturdiness mattered more than aesthetics. The hallway smelled like old wood and something cooking 2 floors up. The elevator was out. Vivian climbed 4 flights of stairs in heels that were destroyed, and a dress that was soaked through, and she did not say a single word about it because she was Vivian Hartwell, and she had walked through worse, different kinds of worse, but worse. Cole unlocked the door and Lily went straight in, peeling off her wet sneakers in the entryway with practiced efficiency and padding immediately toward the kitchen. "I'm making hot chocolate," Lily announced. "You're going to help make hot chocolate," Cole said, following her in. "There's a difference." Vivian stood in the doorway. She had been in a lot of spaces in her life. She had designed some of them: penthouse suites, corporate headquarters, cultural centers with soaring ceilings and engineered acoustics, and every element precisely considered. This apartment was 800 square feet, maybe less. It was clean, very clean, the kind of clean that came from discipline rather than convenience. A couch with a folded blanket on the arm. A small dining table with exactly 2 chairs and a booster seat. A bookshelf where the books were organized by size. A corkboard on the wall near the door with a weekly schedule pinned to it. Lily's school drop-off. Cole's duty roster. A dentist appointment in purple marker labeled, "Lily, don't forget." On the shelf below the corkboard, a framed photograph. Cole in navy whites younger, squinting into sunlight somewhere flat, and very far from here. Beside it, a smaller photo, Lily maybe 2 years old, laughing at something off camera, her arms raised like she wanted to be picked up. No third person in either photo. "You can hang your coat there," Cole said from the kitchen. "I'll find you something dry." She unhooked her soaked coat and hung it on the peg he'd indicated. Reached up to her hair. Half of it had come down in the storm, and pulled out the remaining pins, letting it fall. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding a mug with 2 hands. "It's not ready yet," she said seriously, "but I wanted to see if you were still here." Vivian looked at this child. "I'm still here," she said. Something in her voice came out differently than she intended, quieter, with an edge she didn't have time to smooth away. Lily tilted her head. "Are you sad?" Vivian opened her mouth, closed it. She was the CEO of a company with a $900 million annual portfolio. She had testified before the Senate Infrastructure Subcommittee. She had fired 30 people in one afternoon during the 2019 restructuring and not lost a single night's sleep. She looked at this 6-year-old child with hot chocolate on her sleeve and enormous, serious eyes. "It's been a hard night," Vivian said. Lily nodded, grave and understanding. "Dad says those happen," she said. "He says the trick is you just gotta get to the next morning." She turned and went back to the kitchen. From somewhere inside the apartment, Cole Riker's voice came calm and unhurried, guiding his daughter through the hot chocolate. Vivian Hartwell stood in the entryway of an 800-square-foot Navy apartment in the middle of the worst storm in a decade, with her career in freefall and her mentor's betrayal burning a hole through her chest. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't reach for her phone. She just stood there, and breathed, and waited for morning. The hot chocolate was too sweet. Vivian noticed it the moment she took the first sip, more sugar than cocoa, the way a child would make it if given any say in the proportions which Lily clearly had been. She held the mug anyway, both hands wrapped around the ceramic, and said nothing about the sweetness because Lily was watching her from across the kitchen counter with the focused intensity of someone waiting on a verdict. "It's good," Vivian said. Lily's entire face opened up. "I put in the marshmallows myself. I can tell." "Dad says too many marshmallows defeats the purpose of the hot chocolate, but I think the marshmallows are the purpose." Cole, standing at the stove with his back to both of them, made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant," Lily said with complete confidence. This time, he did laugh, a short, quiet sound, almost surprised out of him. He turned around with a dish towel over his shoulder and set a plate of crackers and cheese on the counter between them. Not fancy, not arranged. Just food placed down by someone who understood that people needed to eat. "It's not much," he said. "I can do eggs if—" "This is fine," Vivian said quickly. "This is more than fine. Thank you." He looked at her for a moment, that same steady assessing look she'd noticed in the street. Not uncomfortable, just present. Like he was actually looking at her, rather than at who she was supposed to be. She was used to being seen a specific way. Even in rooms full of people she'd known for years, there was always a version of Vivian Hartwell that preceded her, the reputation, the record, the particular weight that came with her name. People adjusted their behavior the moment they recognized her. Straightened up, softened or stiffened one or the other depending on what they needed from her. Cole Riker had no idea what he needed from her because he didn't need anything. She was just a woman who'd been standing in the rain. It was, she realized, profoundly disorienting. Her phone buzzed on the counter where she'd set it. She glanced at the screen, Raymond again. Then Priya. Then a number she didn't recognize, which almost certainly meant press. She flipped it face down. Lily watched this with interest. "Are you famous?" she asked. Vivian paused. "Why do you ask that?" "Because famous people always have their phones going off and they always flip them over." Lily considered this. "I saw it on TV." "I'm not famous," Vivian said. "I just have a lot of people who think they need me right now." "Do they? Not tonight." Lily accepted this with a nod. Then she slid off her stool, announced she was going to get Mr. Bear, because he was probably scared of the storm, and disappeared down the hallway. The kitchen went quiet. Cole leaned back against the counter and crossed his arms. Not defensively, just the natural posture of a man who occupied his own space without apology. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said. "About tonight." "I know. But if you need to..." He shrugged slightly. "I'm not going anywhere." The rain was hitting the window above the sink in waves. The storm had settled into something sustained and relentless, the kind that didn't peak and break. It just kept coming steady and indifferent to whatever was happening beneath it. "My mentor stole my work," Vivian said. She hadn't planned to say it. It came out the way things come out when you've been holding them too long and your hands finally get tired. Cole didn't react. He didn't flinch or lean forward or make the particular face people made when they were performing sympathy. He just stayed exactly where he was and let the words exist in the room. "The biggest project of my career," she continued. 31 months of work. He had someone get into our system 8 months ago, apparently, and he built a version of my files with his name buried in the metadata. She stopped, pressed her lips together. "He went on camera tonight and announced it to the entire industry, while I was standing 40 feet away celebrating." Cole said nothing for a moment. Then, "How long have you known him?" 20 years. Another silence. Longer. "That's the part that gets you," he said finally. Not a question, a statement of recognition. She looked at him. "The work is the work," Cole said. "You can fight for the work. You probably will and you'll probably win. But the 20 years? He stopped. His jaw moved slightly like he was deciding how much further to go. "That part doesn't have a legal remedy." Vivian set her mug down on the counter. "No," she said quietly. "It doesn't." There was something in his voice when he'd said it, a particular shade of knowing that didn't come from books or observation. It came from having been on the receiving end of a specific kind of loss. The kind where the facts of the situation were almost secondary to the discovery of who someone actually was beneath everything you'd believed about them. She didn't ask. It wasn't her place, and they were strangers. And she was a woman who understood better than most that some things weren't for sharing until the person holding them decided to put them down. Lily came back with Mr. Bear, a battered stuffed animal, who had clearly been through significant adventures tucked under one arm and a coloring book under the other. "I'm going to color at the table," she announced. "You can watch if you want." Vivian looked at her. "What are you coloring?" "Horses." Lily laid the book on the table and opened it with the authority of someone beginning an important project. "I only color the realistic ones, not the sparkly ones. Dad says real is better." "Your dad said that about coloring books." Lily looked up. "Dad says that about everything." Cole cleared his throat. "I said detail is better than glitter. Context bug. That's basically the same thing." Lily said serenely and uncapped a brown-colored pencil. Vivian sat down at the table. Not because she had anywhere else to go, but because something about watching a 6-year-old color a horse with exacting serious attention was the most grounding thing available to her at that particular moment, and she was desperate in a way she would never have admitted to anyone in any professional setting, under any circumstances, for something grounding. Cole made eggs after all. He didn't ask again, he just made them simple and scrambled and put a plate down in front of Vivian without ceremony, and she ate every bite. They didn't talk much while Lily colored. They didn't need to. Lily provided a near-continuous commentary on the horse's accurate musculature and the correct colors for a bay versus a chestnut. And Cole responded with focused, genuine attention, asking questions that made it clear he had been listening to horse facts for quite some time and had developed actual opinions about them. Watching him with his daughter was like watching someone be completely and entirely themselves. No performance, no code switching. He was the same man at this kitchen table as he'd been on the street in the storm, exact present, not trying to be anything other than what he was. Vivian didn't know many people like that. She wasn't sure she'd ever known one. At some point, she'd stopped tracking time, which was unusual for her. Lily's coloring slowed, then stopped. Her head dropped toward her arm. Cole was across the table from her in an instant, effortless and quiet, scooping her up in the practiced way of a parent who had carried a sleeping child to bed 1,000 times. "She's out," he said softly. "She fights it hard," Vivian said, equally quiet. "Every night." He said it with a tiredness that was fond, rather than burdened. "Back in a few minutes." He carried Lily down the hallway. Vivian heard the low sound of his voice too quiet to make out words, and then a pause, and then nothing. She sat alone at the table. Her phone was still face down on the kitchen counter. She could see the light pulsing through the speaker grill notifications, constant and insistent. The world outside this apartment demanding her attention. She didn't move. She looked at Lily's coloring book, still open on the table. The horse was only half finished. The body done in careful, deliberate strokes, the legs not yet started. The little girl had been meticulous about it, pressing hard on the pencil, for the darkest tones lighter for the shine on the flank. Vivian reached out and touched the page lightly with her fingertip. She hadn't colored anything since she couldn't even remember. Since she was a child herself, probably. Since before she'd understood that the path forward required both hands free and constantly moving. Cole came back. He poured himself a glass of water, leaned against the counter, looked at her. "She wants to be a vet," he said. "I can tell. Last year it was an astronaut. Year before that, a chef." He took a drink. "I try not to get too attached to any one version." "But you let her think all of them are possible." "Aren't they?" Vivian looked at him. "Most of them aren't." "Yeah, well." He set the glass down. "She's 6. She's got time to learn about most." Vivian turned back to the coloring book. "I wanted to be an architect because of a photograph," she said. She hadn't thought about this in years. It came out almost automatically the way old memories do when your defenses are down. "I was 9 years old. My mother had this magazine, I don't even remember which one. And there was a photograph of the Sydney Opera House, and I remember thinking..." She stopped. "What?" "I remember thinking that a person made that. Not a government, not a machine. A person had an idea, and then they made it real, and now there it was, and it wasn't going anywhere." She paused. It seemed like the most permanent thing in the world. Something you could build that would still be standing after you were gone. Cole was quiet. "Reginald Stowe was in a panel I saw at 21, she continued. He talked about design as legacy. The idea that what you build outlives everything else, every mistake, every failure, every version of yourself you're ashamed of. The thing you build is what stays." She looked at her hands. "I walked up to him afterward and told him that was the most important thing I'd ever heard. He laughed and gave me his card. And 20 years later, he put his name on my legacy." Her voice stayed even. She'd had 20 years of practice keeping her voice even. "So..." Cole pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can ask." "Is the work good?" She blinked. Of all the questions, yes. "Is it the best thing you've ever designed?" "Yes." "Then it's yours," he said simply. "Doesn't matter whose name is on it tonight. You know what you built. The people who matter will figure it out." He held her gaze. "The work is the work." He'd said that before. The work is the work. The same words, but now she heard the other side of them, Not just what you can fight for, but what nobody can actually take. The knowledge, the 31 months, the 47 revisions, the specific moment sometime around 2 a.m. on a Thursday in February 2 years ago, when she'd finally cracked the lakefront circulation problem and sat alone in her office, feeling the rare perfect satisfaction of a thing becoming exactly what it needed to be. Reginald Stowe had not been in that office at 2 a.m. Reginald Stowe would never know what it had felt like. "You sound like you've had to hold on to something like that," she said carefully. Cole looked at the table. A beat past the specific kind of beat where someone is deciding whether a door is open or closed. "My wife left," he said. 4 years ago. Lily was 2. He said it without particular inflection, not trying to make it small, not leaning into it. Just facts. She said she hadn't signed up for deployment cycles and single parenting, and the kind of marriage where one person is always waiting. He paused. "She wasn't wrong. I just thought—" He stopped. "You thought she'd stay anyway." He looked up at her. Yeah, the rain had not let up. If anything, it was heavier now, a sustained roar against the windows that made the apartment feel smaller and more enclosed, like the whole world had contracted to these 4 walls and this kitchen table and 2 people who had nothing in common except the specific gravity of things they'd lost. "How do you do it?" Vivian asked. "All of it. Lily, the Navy. Doing it alone. Same way you run a company," he said. "One morning at a time. You don't look at the whole thing. You just look at what's in front of you." "I look at everything," she said. "I have to. If I stop looking at everything, something breaks." "Something breaks anyway," he said. Not unkindly, almost gently. "You just have to decide what you do while it's breaking." She looked at him across the table. This man, this quietly certain, steadily unimpressed Navy officer with a sleeping daughter down the hall, and a weekly schedule pinned to the corkboard and a kitchen full of simple, solid things, had no idea that she had not sat across from someone and talked this way in longer than she could remember. Not without an agenda underneath it. Not without the particular awareness always present of how she was coming across and what it would cost her to be seen as uncertain or hurt or anything other than in command. "I should check my phone," she said. "You should," he agreed. He didn't move. Neither did she. "Priya told me not to do anything until 6 a.m., she said. "Priya sounds smart." "She's the smartest person I employ." Vivian looked at the window at the water streaming down the glass. "I should try to sleep. If you have somewhere—" "Couch is yours," he said, already standing. "I'll get you a blanket." "Cole." He stopped. She wasn't sure why she'd said his name. She hadn't meant to. It had come out like something else was trying to exit through the same door. "Thank you," she said. "For tonight. For all of this." He looked at her for a moment with those steady dark eyes. "You were standing in the rain," he said. "It wasn't complicated." He went to get the blanket. Vivian sat alone at the kitchen table for another minute. She looked at Lily's half-finished horse. She looked at the corkboard by the door, the schedule, the dentist appointment in purple marker, the 2 photographs on the shelf below. Then she picked up her phone. 17 missed calls. 32 messages. A text from Raymond that read in all caps, "Board is meeting at 7 a.m. You need to be there." She set the phone back down. She would deal with it. She would walk back into that world at 6 a.m. when Priya called, and she would make decisions and draft language and sit across from lawyers and board members and say all the right things in exactly the right order. She would do what she had always done. But right now, it was the middle of the night, and the storm was still going, and somewhere down the hall, a little girl was asleep with a stuffed bear, and the man who had carried her there was coming back with a blanket, and the kitchen smelled like eggs and 2 sweet hot chocolate, and Vivian Hartwell, for the first time in a very long time, was simply present in a moment without trying to control what came next. Cole came back with a folded blanket and a pillow he'd taken from somewhere. He set them on the couch without fuss, checked the window latch, turned off the overhead light, and left the small lamp by the bookshelf burning. "Storm should break by early morning," he said quietly. "How do you know?" He almost smiled. Spent enough time reading weather in places where getting it wrong wasn't an option. She believed him immediately. She didn't know why she believed him immediately, except that he was the kind of person whose certainty felt earned rather than performed. "Good night, Vivian," he said. Nobody called her Vivian. Not without the last name attached, not in any professional context, not in years. "Good night, Cole." He went down the hallway. She lay down on the couch, pulled the blanket over herself, and listened to the rain. She was asleep in 4 minutes. She woke up because the power went out. Not gradually, not the slow dimming of something giving up, but all at once the lamp beside the bookshelf cutting off mid-glow like someone had reached down and pinched it out with 2 fingers. The refrigerator stopped its low mechanical hum. The heating unit went silent. And suddenly the apartment was not just dark, but deeply dark, the kind of dark that city people forget exists until the grid fails and reminds them. Vivian sat up. She didn't know what time it was. Her phone was on the kitchen counter. She'd left it there deliberately, a small act of self-discipline she was now regretting, and without it, she had no reference point. The storm was still going. She could hear it working at the windows, relentless and indifferent, the same as it had been when she'd fallen asleep. She sat still on the couch and let her eyes adjust. Nothing adjusted. There was nothing to adjust to. She heard him, before she saw him, the quiet, deliberate footstep of someone who had trained himself to move through darkness without disturbing it. "Power's out," Cole said. His voice came from the direction of the hallway. "I noticed." A small beam of light appeared, a flashlight, not a phone, the kind with real weight and a proper beam. He pointed it at the ceiling rather than at her, which diffused the light into something ambient and less disorienting. "Lily okay?" Vivian asked. "Still asleep." He moved to the window, checked something outside, came back. "Transformer on the next block. Half the neighborhood's probably out." "How long?" "No way to know. Could be an hour. Could be until morning." He set the flashlight on the shelf so it aimed upward, casting the room in a dim, even glow. Then he sat down in the chair across from the couch, the same chair he'd been in earlier at the table, which he'd moved at some point. Or maybe it had always been there, and she hadn't registered it. He was still fully dressed. She wasn't sure he'd slept at all. "You should sleep," she said. "I don't sleep much," he said. Not defensive, just factual the way he said most things. "Military habit. Partly." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Partly just you have a kid and something in you stops fully going offline. Some part stays on." Vivian pulled the blanket around her shoulders. The apartment was already getting cooler without the heat running. "How long have you been doing it alone?" "Really alone, I mean. Without any." "Her mother left when Lily was 22 months old," he said. "So about 4 years of fully alone." He paused. "My sister comes when she can. She's in Baltimore, 3-4 times a year." "That's not much." "No." He said it without self-pity, which somehow made it worse. "But Lily doesn't know what she's missing, so she's not missing it. You can't grieve a gap you don't know is there." Vivian thought about that. "She knows you, though," Vivian said. "She trusts you completely. I saw it the moment I looked at her, the way she held your hand in the storm. She wasn't scared, because you weren't scared." Something moved in his face, brief and quickly contained, but there. "She's the reason I'm good at anything anymore," he said quietly. The rain hit the window in a hard gust. Both of them were quiet for a moment, listening to it. Then Vivian said, "Tell me about the Navy." He looked at her. "Why?" "Because it's 3 in the morning, and the power is out, and I've spent the last 6 hours thinking about myself, and I'd like to think about something else." She paused. "And because you listened to me earlier, and I didn't ask you anything back, which was selfish." He considered this. "It wasn't selfish. You were in crisis." "I'm still in crisis. I'd just like company in it." That almost got a smile. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you want to say." He was quiet for a moment, the thinking quiet, not the uncomfortable kind. "I went in at 19, he said. "Grew up in Pensacola. My dad was Navy. His dad was Navy. It felt less like a choice, and more like the shape of the thing I was already going to be." He paused. "I thought I knew what I was getting into. I didn't. Nobody does." "What surprised you?" "The waiting," he said immediately. "Nobody tells you about the waiting. You think it's going to be motion, action, forward movement. And sometimes it is, but mostly it's hurry up and then stop. Get ready and then wait. Hold your position. The guys who can't handle the waiting, that's where things go wrong for them. And you could handle it. I learned to. He looked at his hands. You find ways to stay present in it instead of fighting it. You stop counting the days until something changes, and you start just being where you are. Vivian stared at him. He noticed. What? I have never once in my life been able to do that, she said. Being where you are. I am always 3 steps ahead of where I am. Planning the next thing, anticipating the problem, running contingencies. She shook her head. My therapist. I had a therapist for about 8 months 4 years ago told me I lived in the future tense. I stopped going because she kept saying things that were accurate and I didn't have time to deal with them. Cole looked at her with that level, steady gaze. That's the most self-aware thing I've ever heard a person say about being bad at self-awareness. Vivian blinked. Then, to her own complete surprise, she laughed. It came out short and a little rough, like something that hadn't been used in a while. But it was real, entirely real, and the sound of it in the dark apartment seemed to surprise both of them. I like that you do that, Cole said. Do what? Say the thing. Most people in your position, I'm guessing they manage what they say. You just said the thing. I told you about Reginald, she said. I don't usually do that. I know. How do you know? Because you looked surprised after you said it, he said. Like you'd reached into a pocket and found something you'd forgotten putting there. She held his gaze for a moment. In the dim, upward-pointed flashlight glow, his face was mostly shadow, and the particular steadiness of his eyes, that was what came through most. Just the steadiness. Why did you let us in? She asked. Tonight. A stranger on the street. That's not, most people don't do that. Lily said you were getting wet. Lily is 6. Lily has good instincts. He leaned back in the chair. And you weren't? He stopped. Started again. There are people who are in a bad situation and they're fine. They're managing. And there are people who are in a bad situation and something underneath is starting to break. You were the second kind. Vivian's jaw tightened slightly. Is it that obvious? No, he said. Only if you know what to look for. He paused. I've seen men hold it together through everything, combat loss, impossible conditions, and then fold in the parking lot afterward because they finally stopped moving. The second you stop moving is when it catches up to you. He looked at her steadily. You were about to stop moving. She didn't answer that. She couldn't quite. The wind hit the building in a long, rolling wave. She could feel it in the walls, and then the rain intensified again, a sudden escalation like the storm was making a point. Cole? She said his name before she knew she was going to say it the same way she had earlier. Can I ask you something personal? You can ask. When your wife left. She stopped, reconsidered. When everything fell apart, what did you actually do? Not how did you handle it, not what was the strategy. What did you do? He was quiet for a long moment. I called my commanding officer, he said, and told him I needed 48 hours. He gave them to me without asking why, which is the thing about good commanders, they don't make you explain the human stuff. He paused. And then I took Lily to the beach. She was almost 2. She couldn't walk in the sand yet without falling, so I just held her. For 2 days. Walked on the beach and held her, and let her grab fistfuls of sand and throw them at the water. He stopped again. I didn't fix anything. I just held on to the thing that was real. Vivian's throat tightened. She looked down at the blanket in her lap. She turned one corner of it over in her fingers. The fabric was soft, not new. The softness of something washed many times. I don't have anything to hold on to, she said. It came out quieter than she'd intended, stripped down, almost involuntary. I built the company. I designed the building. I structured every element of my life around the work. And the work was the thing. It was everything. It was the whole reason. Her voice stopped itself. She pressed her lips together hard. Cole didn't say anything. And I know, she continued pushing through it. I know rationally that I can fight this. Priya said I can fight it. I have documentation. I have the dates. I have everything. And I will fight it. I will go back in there tomorrow and I will fight it. And I will win because I always win. Her hands tightened in her lap. But right now, in this exact moment right now. She stopped. Cole leaned forward. Say it, he said quietly, not a demand, something softer than that an opening. The thing you say when you want someone to know that whatever is on the other side of the door, you're not going to flinch at it. Right now, Vivian said, I am absolutely terrified. The words came out, and then they were just there in the room, undeniable and irretrievable. And Vivian felt the specific vertiginous feeling of having said the true thing after years of saying everything else. She wasn't crying. She almost was. She could feel the precise edge of it, the specific pressure behind her eyes, but she was Vivian Hartwell, and she had not cried in front of another person since her mother's funeral, and she was not going to do it now. But the terror was real. She'd said it, and it was real. Cole got up from the chair. He didn't come to the couch. He didn't presume that didn't make it into a moment she hadn't asked for. He went to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, brought it back, set it on the shelf beside her within reach. Then he sat back down. Okay, he said. Just that. Okay. Not it'll be fine. Not you're stronger than you think. Not any of the things people said to fill up the space that other people's pain made them uncomfortable inhabiting. Just okay, which meant, I heard you, and I'm not leaving, and you don't have to be anything other than what you just said you were. Vivian picked up the water glass and took a slow drink. I spent 20 years, she said, making sure no one ever saw that. Any version of that. I know. It's not. She turned the glass in her hands. It's not a performance. The control. It's not that I'm pretending to be strong. It's that if I ever stop being strong, I don't know what's underneath it. You do, though, Cole said. You just told me. She looked at him. Underneath it is someone who loved the work, he said simply. Someone who was 9 years old and looked at a photograph and felt something that changed the whole direction of her life. Someone who sat at a drafting table at 2 a.m. He stopped. You mentioned that, the Thursday in February. She had mentioned that. In the kitchen earlier, she'd said it almost to herself. He had heard it and kept it. Someone who did the work, he continued, because it mattered to her. That's what's underneath the control. That's not nothing, Vivian. That's everything. The apartment was cold now, the heat long gone, the darkness pressing in around the edges of the flashlight's reach. The storm had been going for hours and showed no signs of exhausting itself. Somewhere down the hall, Lily made a small sound in her sleep, a single syllable, muffled and formless. Both of them turned toward it automatically. Waited. Nothing further. Cole relaxed back. She talks in her sleep, he said quietly. What does she say? Horse stuff, mostly? Vivian's breath came out in something that was close to a laugh. Of course. Last week she said very clearly in the middle of the night, that is not how you brush a mane. Just announced it, then went right back to sleep. To who? No idea. His voice was warm with it, the particular warmth of someone who finds their child genuinely funny, not just lovable. I've learned not to apply logic. They sat in the quiet that followed, and it was a different quiet than the ones before it. The sharp edges had come down. Not because anything had been resolved, her situation was exactly as catastrophic as it had been 4 hours ago. Reginald Stowe's name was still on her work. The board was still meeting at 7. The crisis was still waiting for her, but something had shifted in the quality of the air between them. She had said the true thing, and the room had not collapsed. She reached for the water glass again, and found she'd already finished it. She set it back on the shelf. You're going to be cold, Cole said. He was already standing, moving to the hallway closet. He came back with another blanket older, heavier, and held it out. She took it without argument, layered it over the first. Cole. She looked up at him from the couch. What's the advancement? The one you mentioned? She stopped. You didn't mention it. You took a phone call on the street before the storm. You said I'll be there by 0600, it won't be an issue. And then you looked at Lily. She paused. Whatever they're asking you to do, it's something that changes things for her. He stood very still. She had done it again. Walked through information assembled, it arrived at the conclusion before he'd offered it. It was the thing she did, the thing she had built an empire on. It's not, he started. You don't have to tell me, she said. But I saw your face. He sat back down. Not in the chair this time, on the far end of the couch, a careful distance maintained, nothing presumptuous about it. He sat the way he did everything deliberately. "They're offering me a senior post," he said. "Joint Chiefs Liaison, DC placement." He was quiet for a moment. "It's the kind of thing you work toward for 20 years. But it's not a 12-block commute." He looked at his hands. "Lily's school is here. Her teacher knows her. She's got a friend, first real friend kid named Marco, who lives 2 buildings down." He stopped. "She lost her mother. I'm not—" His voice went tighter, not breaking, but showing the seam where the effort was. "I'm not putting her through another loss and calling it an opportunity." Vivian watched him. "Have you told them that?" "Not yet." "When do you have to decide?" "I have until Friday." It was Tuesday, or Wednesday now. Somewhere in the unreachable middle of the night, with the power out and the storm pressing at every window, and both of them awake and honest in the way that only exhaustion and darkness seemed to allow. "You'll make the right call," she said. He looked at her. "How do you know?" "Because you heard Lily say your name in the rain, and you gave her your jacket." She held his gaze. "You already know what the right call is. You're just waiting to trust it." He didn't respond immediately, just looked at her with that particular steadiness that she had over the course of this impossible night come to understand was not the absence of feeling, but the presence of something much more practiced. The discipline of a man who felt things fully and had simply learned when to let them move through him and when to hold them still. The flashlight battery chose that moment to dim a slow, syrupy fade toward orange. "Battery's going," Cole said. Should probably sleep," he said. "Probably," she agreed. Neither of them moved. The light dimmed further. The rain was quieter now, not stopping, but shifting into something lower and more sustained, the storm beginning somewhere far away, its long, slow argument with itself about whether to continue. Vivian felt the heaviness moving through her. Not the sharp-edged exhaustion of before the wired crisis-sustained alertness, but something softer and more fundamental. The particular weight of a person who has finally put something down. Her eyes closed. She didn't mean for it to happen. She was mid-thought, something about the board meeting, about what Priya would say, when she called about the specific tone she would need to use, when she finally spoke publicly, and then the thought dissolved, and the rain was very far away, and she was asleep. She didn't hear Cole move from his end of the couch. She didn't feel the moment his shoulder came to rest, within inches of hers. Not touching, not presuming, but close enough that if the night got harder, she wouldn't be alone in it. She was simply asleep, and he was simply there. The flashlight went dark. The first thing Vivian was aware of was warmth. Not the warmth of the blankets that was there, too layered and heavy, but something else. A solid, steady warmth along her left side. The kind that had weight and breath to it. The kind that moved slightly slowly in the specific rhythm of someone sleeping. She opened her eyes. The room was gray with early light. The storm had not ended so much as exhausted itself, leaving behind a pale, washed-out morning that came through the windows without conviction. The flashlight on the shelf was dead. The power was still out, and Cole Riker was asleep beside her on the couch. His head dropped to one side, his shoulder solid against hers. His arm, she registered this slowly, like reading a sentence, one word at a time, resting along the back of the couch behind her. Not around her exactly, but close enough that at some point in the night she had apparently leaned into it, and his hand had come to rest at her shoulder. And neither of them had corrected this, because neither of them had been awake to correct it. Vivian did not move. She sat very still and took a full inventory of the situation with the same methodical attention she brought to crisis management. Because that was the only framework she had available at 6 in the morning, in a stranger's apartment with her career in freefall, and her body doing things she had not authorized it to do, namely feeling entirely, almost disturbingly at ease. His breathing was slow, even. The particular depth of someone genuinely completely asleep. Not the performance of sleep, but the real thing, the kind you only fell into when something in you finally let go of watch duty. She looked at his face. He looked younger asleep. The particular set of his jaw that she'd noticed immediately that contained braced quality, the look of a man who kept things in by keeping himself tight, it had released in sleep. He just looked like a man. Tired, human real. Vivian became aware that she had been looking at him for longer than was strictly necessary for a situation assessment. She looked away. Her phone was on the kitchen counter. She could see from here that the screen was dark, dead battery, which meant she had no idea if Priya had already called, if the board meeting had been moved, if the story had broken wider overnight. She had no idea what the world had done while she'd been asleep on a Navy officer's couch with his arm around her shoulder. She should move. She should get up, find a charger plug in her phone, start rebuilding the wall before the day got any further along without her. She did not move. Cole exhaled slowly and shifted the almost waking movement of someone surfacing, and his hand tightened briefly at her shoulder, reflexively, the way you hold on to something when you're not quite sure if you're dreaming, and then his eyes opened. He saw her. She watched him run through it, the same inventory she'd just done, taking in the room, the light, the position, the specific geography of how they'd ended up here. His expression didn't collapse into embarrassment or overcorrect into distance. He just processed it steadily, the way he seemed to process everything. Then he said, "Well, yeah," Vivian said. He straightened slowly, rolling his shoulder, and the arm came away from behind her with a natural ease that somehow made it less awkward rather than more. He sat forward, elbows on his knees, and looked at the dead flashlight on the shelf. "Power's still out," he said. "Yes." "You sleep okay?" Vivian considered the question with genuine surprise, because the honest answer was that she had slept better in those few hours on that couch than she had in any recent memory. Better than her $6,000 mattress in her penthouse apartment. Better than the hotel she stayed in during international conferences. Better than any of the carefully optimized sleep conditions she had built into her controlled and structured life. "Yes," she said. He looked at her sideways. Something in his face was working very hard not to become a smile. "Good," he said. "Don't," she said. "I'm not doing anything." "You're about to say something." "I wasn't going to say anything," he said. The smile won. It was brief and genuine, and it changed his whole face in a way she hadn't been prepared for. "I was going to make coffee." He stood up, moved to the kitchen. She heard him filling the kettle. The power was out, but the stove was gas, and she heard the click and catch of the burner, and then the particular small sounds of a person who knew exactly where everything in their kitchen was and didn't have to think about any of it. Vivian stood, folded the blankets with automatic precision, stacked them on the couch arm. Ran her hands through her hair. She was still in last night's dress, which had dried overnight into a state of wrinkled dignity. She felt simultaneously like she'd been through a war, and like she'd slept, which she supposed was accurate on both counts. She found her shoes by the door, did not put them on. She padded into the kitchen in her stocking feet and leaned against the doorframe. "Your daughter is going to come out of that hallway very soon," she said, "and she is going to have questions about the couch situation." "Lily asks questions about everything," Cole said. "I'll handle it." "She saw us arguing about marshmallow ratios last night. She already has opinions about me. Favorable ones based on available evidence." He poured hot water over the grounds. "She told you about the horses. She doesn't do that with everybody." Vivian thought about that small girl last night with her coloring book and her exacting approach to realistic horse anatomy. Something about it kept coming back to her, the seriousness of it, the particular commitment. The way Lily pressed hard on the pencil for the dark tones. "She's remarkable," Vivian said. "You know that." "Every day," he said quietly. He handed her a mug. "No milk. I checked, it's probably warm by now anyway without power." She took the mug. "Black is fine." She took a sip. It was strong and real and exactly what she needed. "Cole, your phone's dead," he said. He had already found a charging cable she didn't know where she hadn't asked and plugged it into something she couldn't see. "Battery pack, military habit. I keep a couple charged." He set her phone on the counter. "Give it 5 minutes." She stared at the phone. In 5 minutes it would turn on and the world would come back in, and this, whatever this was. This strange, suspended interval, this accidental pocket of honesty that the storm had shaken her into, would begin its collapse into practical reality. 5 minutes, she said. He leaned against the counter across from her, coffee in hand, and they stood in the kitchen in the gray morning light and said nothing for a moment. Then Lily's door opened. She emerged in pajamas that had horses on them. Vivian noticed this and felt a surprised surge of something warm dragging Mr. Bear by one arm, her hair doing several different things simultaneously. She stopped when she saw Vivian in the kitchen doorway and looked at her with the alert, uncomplicated curiosity of a child who had not yet learned to pretend she wasn't looking. "You're still here," Lily said. "I'm still here," Vivian said. "Did you sleep on the couch?" "I did." Lily looked at her father. "Was the couch okay?" "Dad says the couch is lumpy, but I think it's fine." "The couch was perfect," Vivian said. Cole made a sound into his coffee mug. "Dad makes good coffee," Lily told Vivian seriously. "That's his main skill." "Lily," Cole said. "It's a compliment," Lily said with absolute innocence. "I have other skills." "Name one." He looked at his daughter for a moment with the specific expression of a parent being completely outmaneuvered by a 6-year-old. "I can navigate by stars," he said. Lily considered this. "That's not useful in an apartment," she said, and went to the cabinet for her cereal. Vivian pressed her lips together to keep the laugh contained. She didn't entirely succeed. Cole caught her eyes over Lily's head. Something passed between them, brief and light and entirely real. And then he looked away and asked Lily if she wanted the oat cereal or the corn cereal, and the morning continued. The phone turned on at 6:14 a.m. Vivian watched it boot from across the kitchen, not going to it yet, giving herself until it finished the startup sequence. When it was done, it sat there on the counter, and she could see, even from 5 feet away, the notifications stacking on the screen. Not one or two. Dozens. The particular visual chaos of a story that had gone wide overnight. She crossed the kitchen and picked it up. 21 missed calls. The most recent was Priya 13 minutes ago. There were texts from Raymond from 3 board members from her publicist, who she usually heard from twice a year. From 2 journalists she recognized, and 4 she didn't. There were news alerts, she had them set up for her firm's name, and the headlines in the preview text were enough. Hartwell Global Design faces authorship dispute over landmark Meridian contract. Architecture world divided, as Stowe claims. Meridian vision? Hartwell team pushes back. Sources. Hartwell has documentation. This fight is just beginning. That last one was Priya working. She recognized the fingerprints of it. By the time Vivian had been asleep on this couch, her head of legal had apparently been up all night very carefully placing the word documentation into the right ears. She called Priya. It connected on the first ring. "Tell me you're functional," Priya said by way of greeting. "I'm functional." "Where are you?" "It's a long story. What do we have?" She heard Priya take a breath, the preparatory breath of someone about to deliver a large amount of information in a short amount of time. "We have the original Meridian files with full timestamp authentication. We have your email chain with Stowe going back to March 2021, including his message where he calls it, quote, all yours. We have the site survey reports, all 47 revision cycles, and we have a security firm that has already begun tracing the metadata manipulation in his versions back to a third-party contractor. Viv..." Priya paused. "We can win this, not eventually. We can win it fast." Vivian stood very still. "How fast?" "If you give me a statement by 9, and you're at the board meeting at 7, I can have Stowe's foundation issuing a retraction by end of week. His lawyers already called ours this morning." Another pause. "They called us at 5:30 in the morning. That's not what innocent people do." Vivian closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. She had learned this from someone once, a crisis management consultant years ago, who had said 3 seconds is all you need to separate reaction from response. 3 seconds of eyes closed, and then you open them and you see clearly. She opened them. Cole was at the stove making eggs, his back to her, giving her privacy for the call without making a production of it. Lily was at the table with her cereal and her coloring book. The half-finished horse from last night, she'd brought it out from wherever she'd left it, pressing carefully at the dark tones on the unfinished legs. "I'll be at the board meeting," Vivian said into the phone. "Have Raymond send a car. And Priya, good work, really." A short silence on the line. She didn't say that often. She said it when she meant it. Get here, Viv, Priya said and hung up. Vivian set the phone on the counter. Good news, Cole said without turning around. Better than expected news, she said, which is close to the same thing. He turned then, looked at her, the CEO she'd been when she'd walked through his door last night, the woman who'd been on the verge of breaking in the dark, and whoever the amalgam of those two things was, that was standing in his kitchen now at 6 in the morning. He seemed to be looking at all of it at once. You're going to be okay, he said. I know, she said. And then because she was Vivian Hartwell, and she was constitutionally incapable of leaving a statement unqualified. I knew last night too. Knowing doesn't make the 3 a.m. part easier. Nothing makes the 3 a.m. part easier, he said. You just survive it. You helped, she said. She held his gaze. I want you to know that. What you said last night about the work being the work. About what's underneath the control. She stopped. Started again. People don't usually say true things to me. They say useful things or strategic things or careful things. You said the true thing. Cole looked at her for a moment. Then he turned back to the eggs. You made it easy, he said quietly. You were ready to hear it. Lily looked up from her coloring. She had been very obviously pretending not to listen, which meant she had heard everything. Are you going to come back? She asked Vivian. Directly. No preamble. Vivian blinked. Lily, Cole said. I'm just asking, Lily said with perfect reasonableness. Because you never finished your hot chocolate last night, and we still have some mix, and I thought maybe… Bug, Cole said. The word was gentle but definitive. Lily pressed her lips together and looked back at her horse. Vivian crouched down so she was at the girl's level. Lily looked at her sideways, still holding the pencil, pretending to be absorbed in the coloring. Your horse is almost done, Vivian said. Lily looked at it. The legs are the hardest part, she said. They have to be exactly right or the whole thing looks wrong. I know, Vivian said. In architecture we call it the load-bearing problem, the thing that everything else depends on. Lily looked at her with sudden direct interest. What do you do when you can't figure it out? You sit with it, Vivian said. You don't force it. You look at it from a different angle. And then at some point, usually when you're not trying, it comes clear. Lily absorbed this with the gravity of someone receiving important professional guidance. She nodded once, looked at her horse's unfinished legs, then she picked up the pencil and made a careful, confident stroke. Like that, she said. Vivian looked at the line. It was exactly right. Exactly like that, she said. She straightened up. Cole was leaning in the kitchen doorway now, watching the two of them, his coffee mug in hand. He had the look of someone watching something happen that they hadn't expected, and weren't sure what to do with. The car Raymond had sent was 15 minutes out. She could see the text on her phone. She had 40 minutes to get to the board meeting. She needed her coat, which was still damp on the peg. She needed her heels, which were ruined. She needed to get back into the version of herself that walked into boardrooms and held the room, the version that had been almost unreachable at this time last night. She picked up her coat, worked her feet back into the damaged heels because there was no other option. She picked up her phone and her bag from where she'd left them, turned to face the room. Cole had come out of the kitchen doorway. He was standing in the living room, the couch behind him with the folded blankets on the arm, the dead flashlight still on the shelf, the whole evidence of the night laid out in that small, clean space. Thank you, she said, for the shelter, the eggs, the… She gestured slightly, a gesture that was meant to encompass more than she could efficiently say. The true things, he said. The true things, she agreed. He walked her to the door. She was aware precisely of how close he was, the specific distance of someone who was being careful, in a way that was itself a kind of statement. She stopped at the door. The DC post, she said. He went very still. Don't take it, she said. Not yet. Not until Lily's ready for that kind of change. She held his gaze. She told you what she needed last night. She held your hand in the storm and she wasn't scared. You're her load-bearing structure, Cole. You don't move that without being sure of the foundation. He looked at her for a long, unguarded moment. She had read him the way she read buildings, the weight distribution, the stress points, the the whole structure depended on. He knew it, and he wasn't offended by it, and he wasn't going to pretend she was wrong. "I know," he said quietly. "I already know." "Then trust it," she said, just as he had said it to her hours ago in the dark. He almost smiled. "Yeah." Lily appeared in the hallway. "Are you leaving?" she called. "I am," Vivian called back. A pause. Then, "Okay." A beat. "The horse has legs now." "I know," Vivian said. "They're perfect." She heard Lily go back to the table. Back to the work. The way you did when the hard part was done, and the thing was finally becoming what it needed to be. Cole opened the door. The hallway was dim. The building still without power, the stairwell beyond it waiting. Somewhere outside at street level, the city was beginning the slow, complicated process of putting itself back together after the storm. She stepped through the door. "Vivian," Cole said. She turned. He was standing in the doorway, one hand on the frame, the morning light from the window at the end of the hall, doing something quiet to his face. He looked like someone who had something to say, and was deciding in real time how much of it to release. "Whatever happens today," he said, "at the board meeting, with Stowe." He stopped. "You know who you are. Don't let any of it tell you different." Vivian looked at him. She had walked into 1,000 rooms in her career. She had stood before investors and senators and foreign ministers and critics and competitors, and she had never not once felt the particular quality of being seen that she felt right now in this dim fourth-floor hallway by a man who had known her for less than 12 hours. "I won't," she said. She turned and walked to the stairwell. She did not look back, because if she looked back, she was not sure what expression would be on her face, and she had a board meeting in 40 minutes, and she needed to be the version of herself that could walk into that room and hold it. But she was aware with every step down those 4 flights of stairs of the specific weight of what she was carrying out of that apartment. Not just the crisis, not just the strategy and the fight and the long, difficult days ahead. Something else. Something that didn't have a word she normally used. She pushed through the building door into the pale, washed-out morning. The street was wet, the air clean, in the way it only got after a storm had scoured everything down to the original surface. A black car was waiting at the curb. Raymond was inside already on the phone tablet, opened the day in full motion. She got in. "Board is ready," he said, barely looking up. "Priya's already there. Legal has a full package. Stowe's camp has gone quiet, which means they're scared." He finally looked at her, took in the wrinkled dress, the ruined heels, the absence of her usual presentation. He said nothing about any of it. "You ready?" Vivian looked out the window as the car pulled into traffic. Up above, on the 4th floor of the building, they were pulling away from a window. She didn't look for it. She didn't need to. "Yes," she said. And she meant it, not the performed version, not the automatic response she gave in boardrooms, because anything else was unthinkable. She meant it in the way you meant things when someone had stood beside you in the dark and reminded you of who you were before the armor went on. Raymond went back to his tablet. Vivian faced forward. The city moved past the window, still wet, still recovering the streets full of the ordinary aftermath of a storm, downed branches, standing water. The particular human industriousness of a city getting back to business. She had built parts of this city. She had put her hands, her mind, her 31 months into this skyline, and no matter whose name was on what document this morning, that was still true. The work was the work. She pulled out her phone, opened a new message to Priya. "I'm on my way," she typed. "Tell them I'm ready." She hit send. She was. The board meeting lasted 3 hours and 40 minutes. Vivian did not raise her voice once. She walked in wearing the wrinkled dress and the ruined heels, and she sat down at the head of the table, and she opened the folder Priya slid in front of her, and she began. Not with anger, not with the defensive posture of someone justifying themselves. She began with facts clean, chronological, irrefutable, the way you lay a foundation before you build anything on top of it. The timestamps, the email chain, the 47 revision cycles, the security firm's preliminary report tracing the metadata manipulation to a contractor with documented ties to Stowe's organization, the phone records showing Stowe had accessed a shared project server 8 months ago, using credentials that were not his. She laid it all out, and then she stopped talking and let the room absorb it. Gerald Park, the board's longest-serving member, a 70-year-old man who had survived 3 recessions and 2 hostile takeover attempts and was not easily impressed by anything, looked at the documentation for a long moment and then looked at Vivian and said, "How long have you known?" "Since last night," she said. "Priya spent the night building it." Gerald looked at Priya. Priya looked back at him with the specific expression of a person who had been awake for 22 hours and was running entirely on conviction and cold brew. "What do you need from this board?" Gerald asked. "A unified statement of support," Vivian said. "And patience. I don't want to fight this in public. I want to win it in writing in the correct channels, and I want it done before the end of the week." Gerald looked around the table. Nobody spoke against it. "Then do it," he said. She walked out of that room at 11:17 in the morning and stood in the hallway outside the boardroom and felt the particular specific feeling of a structure holding. Not victory, not yet, but the foundation confirmed. The load-bearing elements checked and present. Priya appeared beside her. "Stowe's lawyers called again while you were in there," she said. "They want a conversation." "Schedule it for Thursday," Vivian said. "And Priya?" She stopped. "Go home. Sleep. You've done enough for one night and one morning." Priya looked at her with open surprise. Vivian did not typically issue instructions to go rest. "I'm fine." "I know you're fine. Go anyway." She held Priya's gaze. "Some things can wait until you've slept. This is one of them." Priya studied her for a moment with the attention of someone who had known Vivian Hartwell for 11 years and was now noticing something she couldn't quite name. "Okay," she said slowly. "Okay, yes, I'll go." She went. Vivian stood alone in the corridor. She looked out the window at the end of the hall, the city below still wet from last night, the streets in the particular state of a place putting itself back together. She had a full afternoon of calls ahead of her. Her publicist, the Meridian Project Oversight Committee, 2 journalists she was going to give carefully worded access to, guided by Priya's framework enough to establish the narrative without overplaying the hand. She picked up her phone. She looked at it for a moment. Then she opened a new contact and typed a name. Cole Riker. She stared at the blank number field. She didn't have his number. She realized this with a small, almost amused jolt. She had spent 12 hours in the man's apartment, had slept beside him on his couch, had told him she was terrified at 3 in the morning in the dark, and she did not have his phone number because neither of them had thought to exchange them. Or perhaps both of them had thought of it, and neither had moved on the thought for reasons she was not ready to examine in a corporate hallway at 11:20 in the morning. She put the phone in her pocket. She had work to do. The week moved, the way weeks moved, when you were in the middle of a fight that mattered fast and consuming each day, structured around the next necessary action, the hours going by in the particular blur of purposeful momentum. Vivian worked from her office, from her apartment, from the back of cars between meetings. She slept in her bed in her own dark and quiet penthouse, and the sleep was adequate and functional, and nothing at all like the 4 hours she'd had on a lumpy navy couch in a blackout with rain on the windows. She did not examine that comparison. On Thursday, Stowe's lawyers came. There were 3 of them. Senior men in senior suits who arranged themselves across the conference table from Vivian and Priya, with the slightly deflated posture of people who had been sent to negotiate from a weakened position and knew it. The lead attorney, a man named Callister, who had the careful diction of someone choosing every word, like he was diffusing something, opened by suggesting that perhaps a joint attribution framework could be explored given the collaborative nature of the mentorship relationship. Vivian looked at him for exactly 3 seconds. "No," she said. Callister adjusted his folder. "Ms. Hartwell, we understand your position, but there are ways to structure a resolution that might benefit." "Mr. Callister," she said, "I have time-stamped documentation of 31 months of sole-authored work. I have email correspondence in which Reginald Stowe explicitly credited that work to me in writing. I have a security firm's report tracing the manipulation of my files to a contractor your client retained." She folded her hands on the table. "There is no joint attribution to explore. There is a retraction to issue, a public correction to make, and a conversation to have about how your client's organization accessed my firm's server without authorization. Those are the 3 items on this agenda. Would you like to start with one, or should I? The 3 lawyers looked at each other. By Friday afternoon, Reginald Stowe's Foundation had issued a written statement acknowledging that the Meridian Lakefront vision had originated with and been developed by Hartwell Global Design under the sole creative direction of Vivian Hartwell. The statement described the earlier claim as a miscommunication regarding the nature of the mentorship relationship and expressed deep respect for Ms. Hartwell's extraordinary work. It was, Vivian thought reading it at her desk, the most expensive miscommunication in architectural history. She set the statement down, looked at it. She waited to feel something, the satisfaction, the relief, the vindication she'd spent a week working toward. It was there, present, real. She had fought, and she had won cleanly and quickly, and the work was hers again, on the record where it belonged. But underneath the satisfaction, something else was sitting, quieter, more patient. She picked up her phone. She called the building management office for the address on 51st. This required 3 calls, a mild degree of professional pressure, and a reminder that Hartwell Global Design had redesigned the lobby of their corporate headquarters 4 years ago, which she was not above mentioning. She got the building address. She did not get a unit number because that was further than any building manager was going to go. She showed up anyway. It was a Saturday morning. 10 days after the storm. The sky, the particular clean blue that came after, extended rain as if the weather was trying to make amends. She stood in front of the building on 51st and looked up at the 4th floor and felt slightly ridiculous, which was not a feeling she was familiar with and which she found she did not entirely dislike. She went inside, found the super. Explained briefly without excessive detail that she was looking for a tenant named Cole Riker, that she had been a guest in his apartment during the storm 10 days ago, and that she had left without exchanging contact information, which she was now hoping to correct. The super, a compact man of around 60, who looked like he had heard stranger stories and was reserving judgment, said, "Riker, 4th floor, 4C. "Thank you," she said. She climbed 4 flights of stairs. Her heels were different ones this time, not the destroyed pair from the storm, but a pair she could actually walk in because she had learned something in the intervening 10 days, or perhaps relearned something she'd always known and stopped applying. She stood in front of 4C. She knocked. Footsteps. The particular quick, light percussion of small feet, and then Lily's voice very close to the door. "Who is it?" "It's Vivian," she said, "from the storm." A pause. Then, in a tone of complete delight, Dad, it's the CEO lady." A longer pause. A sound of movement. Then the door opened. Cole Riker stood in the doorway in a gray t-shirt and jeans, coffee mug in hand, looking at her with an expression she couldn't immediately categorize. Surprise, yes, but underneath it, something quieter and more settled, like a door that had been left slightly open, and someone had finally walked through it. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she said. "A beat." "I don't have your number," she said. "I realized after I left." "I realized that too," he said. "I thought about looking it up," she said. "I am resourceful." "I have no doubt." "But that felt slightly alarming," he offered. "I was going to say excessive, but yes." She looked at him. "So I came in person, which is arguably worse." "It's not worse," he said. Lily appeared in the space under his arm, looking up at Vivian with the focused intensity she brought to horse anatomy and hot chocolate ratios. "Did you win?" she asked. Vivian blinked. "Excuse me." "The work thing," Lily said. "The man who took your stuff. Did you win?" Cole looked down at his daughter. "Bug. Dad told me," Lily said, unrepentant. "After you left, I asked where the lady went and why she looked sad, and he told me someone had been mean to her and she was going to go fight it." She looked back at Vivian with steady, serious eyes. "So did you win?" Vivian crouched down to her level. "Yes," she said. "I won." Lily's face opened completely. "Good," she said with a satisfaction so genuine it was almost fierce. Because that was not fair, and fair matters. Fair matters, Vivian agreed. Lily looked at her father. Can she come in? I finished the horse. Cole looked at Vivian over his daughter's head. Something in his expression was doing several things at once. Amusement, warmth, the particular look of someone standing at an edge and deciding without fanfare to step forward. You want to see a finished horse, he said. Vivian stood. I would like nothing more, she said. He stepped back from the door. She walked in. The apartment was the same clean spare structured the corkboard with the schedule by the door, the bookshelf with the photographs. The couch with the blankets folded on the arm, whether in the same position from 10 days ago or folded again, she couldn't tell, and it didn't matter. Lily pulled her immediately to the kitchen table, where the coloring book was open to the horse. It was finished, every line, complete, the legs exactly right, the body shaded with careful, deliberate pressure. It was, Vivian thought, genuinely accomplished work for a 6-year-old. Or for anyone. You were right, Lily said. I stopped forcing it. I looked from a different angle, and then it just came clear. Vivian looked at the horse for a moment. Then at Lily. It's perfect, she said. Can I ask you something? Yes, Lily said. What are you working on next? Lily considered this with appropriate gravity. I'm thinking maybe a dog, she said. A realistic one, not a sparkly one. Obviously not sparkly, Vivian said. Obviously, Lily agreed. Cole had refilled his coffee and was leaning against the counter. There's more, he said. If you want some. Please, she said. She sat down at the kitchen table. He poured a second mug and brought it over and sat across from her, and Lily settled beside them with a fresh page and a pencil, beginning her preliminary lines for the dog, with focused concentration. For a moment, they just sat there, the three of them, the Saturday morning light coming through the window. The coffee warmed the city going about its business outside. The DC Post, Vivian said. Cole looked at her. I turned it down, he said. When? Wednesday. He wrapped both hands around his mug. Put in the answer Tuesday night, actually. After Lily asked me at dinner if our apartment was going to stay our apartment, and I said yes, and she said good because she'd told Marco he could come over Saturday to see the horse. He paused. Marco was the deciding vote. Marco sounds like a reasonable person, Vivian said. He's 6, Cole said. They usually are. Lily looked up from her preliminary dog lines. Marco is very reasonable, she confirmed and went back to work. Vivian looked at Cole. He was watching her with that steady level attention, the same look from the street in the rain, from the kitchen, from the 3 a.m. darkness. The look that saw what was actually there, rather than what she presented. How are you? He asked. Not as a formality. Better, she said. Genuinely better. She paused. I've been thinking about what you said. About being where you are. Not the whole thing, just what's in front of you. And I'm trying, she said. I'm not good at it. Nobody starts out good at it. You seem like you started out good at it. I started out terrible at it, he said. I was 22, and I thought forward momentum was the same thing as progress. My first commander spent 6 months making me stand still before he let me do anything else. He took a drink of his coffee. Best thing that ever happened to me. What did he do? Your commander made me responsible for the unit's equipment maintenance. Detailed, systematic, daily. Nothing exciting. Just show up, do the work, do it right. He set the mug down. You can't rush maintenance. Either you did it or you didn't. Either it works or it doesn't. He looked at her steadily. Taught me that most of the important things in life aren't dramatic. They're just consistent. Vivian turned her coffee mug in her hands. I've never done anything consistently that wasn't in service of a goal, she said honestly. What's the goal now? He said. After Meridian. After Stowe. What's the next thing you're building toward? She looked at him. It was a question she hadn't let herself sit with yet. The week had been too full of the immediate fight, and before that there had been the storm and the darkness and the rawness of the night in this kitchen. She hadn't looked past the crisis to what came after it. I don't know yet, she said. The words came out without the discomfort she would have expected. She didn't know, and she was saying she didn't know, and the ceiling was still above her, and the floor was still below her, and nothing had collapsed. "That's okay," Cole said simply. "Is it?" "Yeah." He held her gaze. "Not knowing is just standing at the start of something. You've done that before." She had. She'd stood at the start of everything she'd ever built, staring into the gap between what didn't exist yet and what she intended to make real. She'd always known eventually what to build. She would know this time too. "Cole," she said. "Yeah, I'd like to—" She stopped. Started again. Because she was Vivian Hartwell, and she said the true thing even when it required effort. "I'd like to see you again, outside of a crisis context ideally, without a storm as the reason." She held his gaze steadily. "I'm not good at this, at the whatever this is. I don't have a lot of practice. But I think you know that already." Cole looked at her for a moment. Not making it easier, not rushing to fill the space, just letting her words exist in the room and settle. Then, "I know that," he said. "I'd like that too." Lily did not look up from her dog, but she smiled small and private, and deeply satisfied the smile of a child who had been paying attention to the entire conversation and had her own conclusions, and was keeping them to herself. For now, they sat at that kitchen table for another hour. Cole talked about a renovation he'd been following, a civic center project in Philadelphia that had been stalled for 3 years and had finally broken ground. He'd been following it in the news casually, the way people follow things that intersect with someone they're thinking about. Vivian knew the project. She knew the architect. She had strong opinions about the site circulation plan that she shared with more animation than she'd intended, and Cole listened with the focused attention of someone who was genuinely interested, rather than politely waiting, asking questions that showed he'd actually understood what she'd said, rather than just heard it. Lily finished her preliminary dog sketch and held it up for assessment. Both adults looked at it seriously. The dog had excellent posture and an expression of great dignity. "The ears," Lily said. "I'm not sure about the ears." "They're not quite right," Vivian agreed carefully. "Too long, slightly." Lily studied the page. "I'll fix them," she said, and bent back over the work. Cole caught Vivian's eye. Something in his face was open and present, and entirely unguarded in the way she had come to understand, was simply what he was not: performed openness, not strategic warmth, but the real thing. The thing that couldn't be faked because it required too much consistency across too many ordinary moments. She had spent 20 years in rooms full of people who were very good at performing versions of themselves. She had learned to read the seams in the performance so well that she'd stopped trusting anything that looked like warmth. Cole Riker had no seams. That was the thing that had reached through all of her armor on a wet street corner in a storm and touched something she'd almost forgotten was there. She stayed until almost noon. When she finally stood to go, Lily walked her to the door with the seriousness of a small official hostess, making sure her coat was retrieved from the peg and her bag was accounted for. "Come back before Marco gets here," Lily said. "He wants to see the horse too. You could tell him the thing about looking from a different angle." "Bug," Cole said. "What?" "She explained it well," Lily said with perfect logic, and went back to her dog. Vivian stood at the door. Cole stood across from her, the same position as 10 days ago. Hand on the frame, morning light at his back, the small apartment behind him full of the quiet evidence of a life built on what mattered. She took out her phone, opened a new contact. "Your number," she said. He told her. She entered it. Then she held the phone out to him, and he took it and added something. He handed it back. She looked at the screen. Under his name he had typed, "The True Things." She looked up at him. "So you remember where it started," he said. She held his gaze. Everything she might have said, the careful, controlled, strategic version of whatever this was, went quiet. "I remember," she said. She walked down the 4 flights of stairs and out into the Saturday morning. The city was bright and ordinary, and full of people going about the specific, modest business of their lives, getting coffee, walking dogs, pushing strollers, carrying groceries, moving through the ordinary day, with no idea what the storm had rearranged for anyone else. She stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the 4th floor. She had spent 20 years building things that were meant to outlast her. Structures that would stand in the skyline after she was gone, permanent, and certain the most durable form of legacy she could imagine. She had believed for a long time that permanence was the point. That what you built in stone and steel was more real than what you built between people, because stone and steel didn't leave, didn't betray, didn't put someone else's name on your work in front of 11 cameras at a gala in Washington, D.C. She still believed in the buildings. She always would. But she understood now, standing on this wet sidewalk in the clean-aired aftermath of a storm with a Navy officer's phone number in her pocket filed under the true things, that permanence and safety were not the same word. That control and trust were not synonyms. That you could build walls strong enough to hold a city skyline and still find yourself stranded in the rain, needing somewhere to come in from the cold. And that the most important thing about that night was not that she had survived it. She had always been going to survive it. She survived everything. That was not in question. The most important thing was that she had let someone stand beside her while she did. She turned and walked toward the avenue. The city opened up ahead of her, wide and complicated and full of things she hadn't built yet. Problems she hadn't solved. Structures that didn't exist yet in anyone's imagination except possibly hers. She put her hand in her pocket, felt the phone there solid and present. She had work to do. She would do it. And for the first time in 20 years, she was not doing it alone.